I'm Tricia Perry for Vision of the Valley. As the 25th U.S. President, William McKinley was the first president to do many things: ride in an auto, campaign by phone, and meet with the press on a regular basis. You can find out all about his life right here at the First Presidential Museum in Niles. Well, hi, Trish.
Hi, Tricia.
Yes,
How are you?
And like I said, that doesn't happen very often.
No.
We both have the same name. But this room is taking my breath away. This is beautiful.
Oh.
This is part of the memorial, right?
Right. This is part of the original plan of the memorial. And I get a lot of local people who go over to the library and then they don't realize that we have this beautiful museum over here.
So this is to William McKinley, but is it usual to have such a big room like this inside of a memorial to a president? Do most of them get designed this way?
No, they usually don't. And in fact, this is actually the first presidential museum. What Joseph Butler of the Butler Art Museum, he was a local entrepreneur and actually known to people throughout the United States in the iron and coal and steel and transportation industry. But he was also a lifelong friend of William McKinley's. And so what he actually planned on was in a speech on February 4th of 1910, he came up with this idea that he wanted to have a place that was a memorial in William McKinley's birthplace. And at one time, there was a plaque that was on the building where the original house stood just down the street here, but it wasn't very big. And he said, we should have more than just that here. So what he wanted was a place where people could gather. So we have the auditorium here.
Okay.
And we also wanted a place for the public library to be. So that's across the way.
Yeah.
And then we also wanted a place to have a place where people could come and remember the name and the good works of William McKinley. So the auditorium originally had built-in seating up in the balcony, and the museum itself was originally placed in 2 rooms in the library. But about 51 years ago, 1967, they decided that they wanted to use the 2 rooms in the library, so our seating was taken out upstairs and the museum was put in up here.
So when you have something for a president, I know we've seen lots of memorials, Washington Memorial, Jefferson, all of that. They don't usually include a room like this. So the thought behind that was there should be a place for the community to meet.
Yes, yes.
Because he believed in that?
Oh, yes. Yes, he very definitely did. And he felt that this was something that McKinley would really appreciate, and so that was what why he planned this.
From the outside, it looks like a memorial you would find in Washington D.C. or something.
Right.
So it's kind of surprising. Do you get that a lot from people who find it?
We do. We actually found that I think Joseph Butler had a really good sense of what he wanted, and so. What he did was he got McKim, Mead, and White, who were very well-known American architects, to actually design the building. And of course, there was a blind competition. 6 architectural firms actually submitted their designs, and they didn't sign their designs, but there was a number on the back of the design. It corresponded with a number that was on the envelope that contained the name of the architectural firm. So they knew that they wanted it to be in the shape of a Roman temple. So of course we have two equal-sized wings, and the court of honor outside is also equal in size to those. And well, the Kim Mead and White's design was chosen. And of course, now the big thing with the Roman temple is that it's always got a statue of the god in the middle of it. Well, we have McKinley right there. He's apparently our god.
And then in here you have everyone else.
Right, right.
Pretty much everyone else.
And those were actually people who were, they had actually, profited from William McKinley's actual high protective tariff policies. These were the movers and the shakers and the business people in those days of the nation. And they had actually become friends with Joseph Butler because he was one of those movers and shakers too.
Sure.
And so from there, well, Joseph Butler knew that because of our charter, which was signed into law March 4th of 1911, it stated that the National McKinley Birthplace Memorial Association was not to accept government funding and in any part of the building. And so what they actually did then was Joseph Butler began approaching these friends of his, and he said to them, you know what, you need to give some money back. Because you benefited from those high protective tariffs. But at the same time, he had to kind of say, you know what, if you give me at least $1,000 for this building fund, you get a bust. Mm-hmm. So consequently, we have some of them that gave more than that. Some of them gave $5,000. Andrew Carnegie, who was over in the library, he gave $5,000. The big one when you walked into the library was Henry Clay Frick. And Henry Clay Frick is the largest donor.
Right?
Right. Mm-hmm. And he actually gave $50,000. The story goes that Mr. Butler visited Mr. Frick at his home in New York, and they got to talking about funding this building. And so Mr. Frick said to Mr. Butler, well, how much do you need? Mr. Butler very boldly said $50,000 just to erect the library wing. And so Mr. Frick thought about it for a few minutes, and Mr. Butler continued boldly on, and he said to them, and should I actually put your name on the library? And Mr. Frick said, no, I don't want my name on the library at all. But he immediately walks into his study, writes out that $50,000 check, which is the equivalent of $1.5 million today.
Oh my goodness.
Gives it right there to Mr. Butler on the spot.
So in addition to that, being a good fundraiser, he was also his friend. So
Right.
he was devoted for a few reasons. He loved history, he loved McKinley, and they were good friends, and he managed to raise the money, right?
Right.
What was their friendship like? Did they live here?
Yes, they lived here in Niles, and actually they became friends, schoolboy friends, actually. And of course they, the story also goes that at one point the boys all went swimming in the creek, and at one point somewhere along the way William McKinley got in, let's say a little too deep, and so he started struggling, and Joseph Butler jumped in, tried to save him. But then it ended up that Joseph Butler almost got in trouble there too. He was almost drowning too. So a young man named Jacob Sheeler was nearby, and he saved both of them. But that's one of our
One of
good
your
stories. Yeah.
What happened to Jacob Sheeler?
We don't really know. I know Jacob Sheeler. There were Sheeler family members who continue to live here, so I'm assuming that he was okay. So
Somehow he was okay. So as you were saying, this used to have seating up here, but then
Yes.
it's been removed to make way for your museum pieces, right?
Right, it has. And It seems to work out pretty well for us, actually, to have these, to have this up here.
Wow, this is beautiful up here too.
Oh, yes.
So a lot of the artifacts in this museum, I mean, all of them are William McKinley based, but compared to other places that are also collecting presidential artifacts, how does this compare?
Well, I am told that we have actually the largest collection of McKinleyana, as it's called, in the world. So several years ago, our Board of Trustees purchased the George Bechtel collection, which George Bechtel was a grandson of George Cortelyou. George Cortelyou was McKinley's presidential secretary.
Oh, wow.
And so he helped Mrs. McKinley out quite a lot after the assassination, of course. And there were many, many times where she was cleaning things out of her home and he was helping her, and she would say to him, "Oh, just throw that away." He kept them. Mm-hmm. And when the collection passed to his grandson, of course, then many, many things actually were added as well.
So this display goes chronologically with information and items from his childhood, right? Birth and childhood, right here?
Yes.
So he was born here in Niles.
Right. He was born actually about a half a block south of here, at 40 South Main Street. And here we have a photo of the house as it appeared.
Wow.
And also, these are his parents here, Nancy Allison McKinley and William McKinley, Sr.
I love this part. I have to skip right to 1859, where he taught one term in Poland, which is where I live.
Right.
Yes, we hear
did.
all kinds of things about McKinley in Poland because we know he also was there for a while. So we kind of feel like a sisterhood to Niles.
Oh, yes. And actually, I understand that when he was teaching in Poland, he actually walked 2.5 miles to and from his home to the school.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so after his graduation in 1859, he did teach for one term in Poland. And then he decided to go to Allegheny College in Pennsylvania. Meadville, Pennsylvania, but he left there after a very brief time due to illness. This is a picture of some of the boys that were his friends.
Oh, do I see a Butler in there, but not the same Butler?
It's a different Butler.
There's a Joseph
Urban
G.
Butler.
And Joseph G. Butler, it says on the top line.
Oh, okay, yes, that is him then. Yes.
Yeah, lots of Butlers.
He did go to Albany Law School in New York, and then he moved into Canton, Ohio, because his sister was living there at the time. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Canton McKinley High School was named for the sister because she was a teacher and administrator there.
Oh, wow.
And so she invited William and later on other members of their family to move there. William did. He opened up his law practice in Canton, and he got to know Ida Saxton McKinley, who was the daughter of a very prominent banker, and herself a very well-educated young lady. Mm-hmm. She was educated to take over her father's bank, basically.
Wow.
And so they got married on January 25th, 1871.
And it looks like, and tragically, two daughters who both passed away young.
Right.
And this little
right,
one,
that's Katie.
Little Katie. And,
right.
And is there a little note that someone wrote there?
Yes, there is a note there that is kind of a memorial poem to little Katie.
Kind of amazing that despite the tragedy and the difficulty in his marriage and with his wife's illness too, that he still made great accomplishments.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So moving on to politics,
Of
I
course,
see in the county level here, he was a prosecutor.
right, he won in 1869. That was his first election, Stark County prosecutor.
And
then a few years later, well, he decided that he was going to run for United States House of Representatives. He was there basically from 1876 until 1882, and then again from 1884 until 1890. And at that point, he was the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. Gerrymandering is kind of a big thing that we're talking about now. Well, gerrymandering was what happened to him. In 1890, he got gerrymandered out of his seat. But of course, at that point, they also had the McKinley Tariff passed, which increased the taxes on imports, so to protect foreign goods. But then he was elected governor of Ohio in 1891, didn't let it stop him. So 1891, there he was. And so he continued and was reelected again in 1893 as governor.
He then, at some point, runs for president, right?
Right. What basically happened was that after he retired from being the governor of Ohio, he was making speeches for other candidates, and the Republican Party heard him and saw him, and they said, we would like for him to run for president of the United States. Now, of course, it's pretty well known that his campaign manager was Mark Hanna. And a lot of people kind of felt that he was a puppet of Mark Hanna, but he was very much his own president. But we'll talk about that later on. This is the first presidential election where we are using a lot of campaign memorabilia. Of course, here we have Youngstown Day in Canton, where that was actually the front porch campaign. And so you can see that thousands of people came. They estimated that approximately 750,000 people made the trip to Canton just in 3 months to hear him.
And all these items were made for that election or for his campaign.
Right.
I never even knew there was such a thing as a gold bug.
Oh, yes.
And a campaign horn, that's
right. The
funny.
gold bug actually is because McKinley supported the gold standard. And of course, his opponent was William Jennings Bryan, who actually supported the silver standard. But this is also the first election where they're actually making really good use of campaign pins, because just by coincidence, they had just been patented 2 years before.
Oh,
so
perfect.
when you have a collection of McKinley campaign pins, then you've got some of the earliest campaign pins ever made.
So he was a big tariff guy.
Oh, yes.
He wanted
yes.
to...
And that was because his father from here was actually a manager of iron blast furnaces. So McKinley grew up and he knew that these were going to, you had to support American industry to keep the American workers working.
So the taxes were on the imports from other countries.
Right.
What's that weird little baby?
Okay, that is a soap baby. And what they did was they tried to make campaign memorabilia pretty useful. Well, that was a baby that was made out of soap, okay? And it has a tag on it that says, "My papa will vote for McKinley."
So he was elected to be president and then reelected. And of course, if anyone knows anything about American history, you know how the tragedy ended his presidency. But in your mind, what should the focus be? If you take away the terrible ending, what would the focus and the best thing about his presidency be?
Well, the Spanish-American War would be one of them, and the other one would be the foreign policy that we had to have as a result of the Spanish-American War. Now, of course, we got involved with Cuba and their rebellion against Spain. They wanted their independence, and well, what happened was that as they called it in those days, the Yellow Press was putting a lot of pressure on the president, and they said, you have to get us involved with this. Well, when the Maine was sunk on February 15th of 1898, only 120 years ago, they actually really started putting pressure on the president. And he was one who said, "I have seen war and I don't want other men to get involved with war." People tend to think of him as, kind of a person who got overshadowed by his successor, Theodore Roosevelt. But his big thing was this Spanish-American War. We needed a trade route to China, that was part of it, and the other part of it was we need a place to sell our surplus US-made goods. So that was where that all happened. And of course, after the war then, we have a lot of prosperity. His campaign was a full dinner pail. And of course, his original vice president, Garrett Hobart, he passed away in 1899, left McKinley without a vice president for a while until Theodore Roosevelt was named. And so, of course, then McKinley continues to use the front porch campaign, but Theodore Roosevelt actually makes a 600-stop whistle-stop campaign in McKinley's favor, and that actually wins him the election.
And what is this flag here?
Okay, this is actually the official presidential banner. In other words, it's a presidential flag. I believe each president has a different symbols on their flags and that. And this was one that was made in wool bunting with cotton satin applique. September 5th of 1901, McKinley was at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, and he gave his last speech there. And then on September 6th of 1901, he actually was greeting his admirers in the Temple of Music, shaking hands as we demonstrated earlier. And a young man by the name of Leon Czolgosz came up, and he had his hand wrapped in a bandage, and that actually concealed the weapon. And so he shot McKinley twice at point blank range. Unfortunately, they did take him to McKinley to the infirmary that was on the grounds, and did some surgery, but they could not locate the second bullet. The first bullet, that was fine. They located it in McKinley's clothing, actually. But the second one, they couldn't locate it. He reached all the way down, almost into his spine practically. He was coming through the front. And there was just no way that they could find it. Our belief has always been, had they used the X-ray machine that was on the fairgrounds at the time, they might have located it.
Wonder why they didn't use that.
I don't know. I think that we had several doctors there who didn't know how to use it.
Right. So this is devoted to many items that are devoted to his death. It looks like black ribbons and pins that are attached to black ribbons.
Right.
And it was 8 days later that he passed away. So after going around the timeline, we get to the end here, and we actually can enjoy the rest of the room and the museum and the building, and just really enjoy the space, because you have the memorabilia and the artifacts going all the way around the room, and then all of the busts of the friends and supporters, right?
Right.
So when people come to this museum, where do they usually like to start?
Well, we always tell them to start up here, but there are some people who, find that more interesting too over there, because It's actually, you know, like the furniture and that they sat on, and
Well,
you
let's
know,
go over
different
there.
things like that.
Let's walk down there.
Okay.
So what would you like to point out here that is of interest and connected to the McKinley life?
Okay, well, this is actually Ida's rocker that the model is sitting on here. And it was one where she would do her crocheting. And it's a lower seat. You can't see it with the model on it, but it is a lower seat. It's called a slipper chair.
I know what slipper chairs are. I have one.
Okay.
Yes.
And actually, she knitted, she knitted some of her some slippers in there, and, while sitting in this chair, and it was very therapeutic for her. She was supposed to have knitted approximately 4,500 pairs of slippers.
Oh my goodness.
Which she gave to various charities and her friends and different people like that.
How is that
So,
even possible in one lifetime to knit that many?
I
Let's
know.
move down here. What do we have down here next to him? What is that? Look at that clock.
Oh, the clock is another piece of memorabilia that, of course, would have been produced to kind of remember McKinley. And of course, it's got a couple of, one soldier and one sailor there, and of course McKinley up at the top. So if you didn't have room for busts like we do, then you had a small bust of him.
Yes, very
so you
nice.
would remember him.
Very nice. Other items of interest you want to point out?
I have to point out the painting that's here too. Well, the painting that you see here was actually commissioned by McKinley and Mark Hanna, and it was commissioned just before McKinley's assassination. It was done by Robert Hooper. And what Mr. Hooper ended up doing, because this was not completed until 1903, Mr. Hooper ended up using various photographs of the president in order to complete it. So it's almost a very tragic type of thing here too, because this was completed after he had died, and so very sad.
So how did it come to be that this was here? I mean, it could be in the memorial that's in Canton. It could be, in a presidential library.
I believe it was actually donated by the artist.
Oh, wonderful.
And I recently had contact with the artist's granddaughter, and they were asking about it. So yes, we still have it here.
So do you get a lot of visitors that are connected to these people that are
Yes.
relatives of some of the people we're talking about?
Yes, very definitely we do. And it's always fun to get their perspective of it. And sometimes they don't have quite all the story, so we provide them too. So
When you were thinking of him, I mean, obviously you work here, and I can tell you really admire William McKinley. What is it that you like about him?
I like the fact that he supported the workers. In those days, the Republican Party was not what it is today. Republicans are more conservative and support big business and that sort of thing, and it's the Democrats who support the more common people in that. That was kind of the beginning of the transition of ideologies.
Well, and this chair is amazing right here.
Oh yes, I love that it's so ornately carved. But this is also the chair in which William McKinley sat during his cabinet meetings. We have a photograph of him actually sitting in the chair. And we've also got a letter from George Cortelyou, McKinley's presidential secretary, stating that he had seen Mr. McKinley sitting in the chair. So it's kind of what we call a letter of provenance.
Yes,
And,
it's nice to have it together. It really gives it some credibility, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah, backs up your
And
information.
then this one going back to Canton, actually.
The desk.
Right. This was actually in his law office in Canton, along with the chair. It is what they call a partner desk, meaning that
Right.
the law partner, in this case it was Abner, his brother, and he and Abner shared a desk.
I know. It's amazing how you don't even need these kinds of things in a desk anymore. Like, I'm sure they rolled up papers and things and put them in those
Oh, yes.
cubbies.
Yes. Yes.
You know, desks don't need to be like that anymore.
Right. And then this chair over here was also from the law office, and William McKinley Sr., the president's father, actually sat in the chair and he whittled, you know, carving and all that. And if you look really, really closely at that chair, there's little knife marks in it.
And then these are nice. I see a picture of the desk and then his wife
Right.
and him. It says, why are those three pictures together? Ida,
Yes.
in her inaugural dress. Is that the
Right.
same dress as that one?
I think it is.
It looks
Yes.
similar.
Very
Yes.
similar. Ida's tastes in her gowns and that I just read tended to be a little more old-fashioned,
Right.
but at the same time very ornately jeweled, and you know,
Right.
and all this. Oh, it's beautiful stuff. So,
Yeah, definitely.
and of course, the president's style was to be dressed just so.
Right.
And, you know, he was the first one in a very long line of presidents who was clean shaven. So,
No beard.
right.
So even though this room is empty right now, and there is no meeting going on, it really does lend itself to all of these lovely statues. And these are all, I mean, I noticed some of the names are from around here. Some of them are just well known nationally, but they are all they're all people that supported William McKinley, right?
Right.
And supported this place.
Right.
So tell me about, and let's walk over into the middle because I just like to stand in the middle and look up.
Okay.
Tell me how what was the year that this started, that Joseph Butler decided that this was going to be a memorial to McKinley? When did he decide that?
Well, he came up with the idea at a meeting of the Niles Board of Trade, which eventually became the Niles Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
They were speaking over kind of across the street at the Antler Hotel, and he came up with that February 4th of 1910, and he said, I want it to be something more than just this little plaque that is on the bank building where the house used to be.
This is certainly something more.
Yes, yes, very definitely.
This is very nice. It's really
yes.
lovely. And to have the library on the other side, and to have in the summer and the nice months, it's so pretty outside in the middle.
Oh, yes,
And
yes.
have the statue of William McKinley in the middle.
Oh, yes.
It's really an amazing place.
Oh, yes.
Do you ever feel that it's really unique that you got to work in this amazingly unique place?
Oh, yes, definitely, because, you know, we have certain things that we do here because of the way that we are, the way the law reads for us, that National Park Service, which operates most of the other presidential sites, except for the George W. Bush. That's the only one that is operated by private funding besides us.
So this was completed in what year?
October 5th of 1917 was our actual dedication.
And was everything in place, like even the statue in the middle of McKinley?
Yes,
everything
and
was there?
actually McKinley's sister Helen actually unveiled the statue at the dedication.
So, and the statue was made by who?
By John Massey Ryan, the same one who did the majority of our busts.
So here at the stage, above everyone else is the bust of William McKinley. However, it's smaller than all the other ones. Why is that? Do you know?
Well, most of our busts were done by John Massey Rind, who was a noted American sculptor. This is one of the 4 that was not done by Mr. Rind, and this one was done by a sculptor in Canton, Ohio in 1896. Might have been done for another statue there or whatever, but we are trying to make out the signature on the back, and we cannot make it out.
It's a museum, but it's different than any other museum that I've really ever come
because
across.
what other museum can you go to where you can go to, let's say, a McKinley Christmas type of program where there's entertainment on the stage, or a dinner down here, and then you go upstairs and there's a museum.
The museum is open Monday through Thursday and by appointment on weekends, but it's best to find the hours on Facebook at McKinley Birthplace. And remember, as his friend Joseph Butler wanted it, it is free to walk in the door. For Vision of the Valley, I'm Tricia Perry.